Well, the White Sox found a way to blow another lead. I'll discuss how they managed to find a way to lose to the Texas Rangers last night, next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of Southside Showdown, part of the Fansided Network. You can check out my written content at southsideshowdown.com. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. Also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Well, no one is better at blowing leads this season than your Chicago White Sox. It is a huge reason the team has now reached 75 losses on the year. The Sox had a 3-2 lead last night against the Texas Rangers in the bottom of the ninth, and John Brebbia could not get out number 3 as the Rangers tied the game up in that frame with 2 outs, and they were also down to their last strike. Texas went on to win the game 4-3 in extra innings. I'll discuss how Pedro Grifol went from potentially managing a good game and potentially one of his best games to the end result being a defeat. And in the second segment, the Sox have now reached 75 losses, so let's see where they track with the other historically bad teams in terms of when they hit the diamond mark in defeats. And finally, the Sox did spend some money on their draft picks. I'll discuss why that is a good thing, and hopefully they spend more on their scouting and development going forward. This episode of Locked On White Sox is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. Well, Pedro Grifol made a bold move in the 7th inning when he tabbed Michael Kopech to come in and relieve Eric Fedde, who put a runner on as, Fedde wore out. It was the 7th inning. Kopech almost had a big inning where he was going to blow the lead. His cleat got caught, and that caused a balk. So runners now on second, but calmly got the next 2 outs and pitched a clean 8th. Now, nothing wrong with seeing that that's a huge moment in the game, so you should go with your best reliever. The process makes sense. The timing does not, though, as the Sox have won just 27 games this season. This wasn't some game the White Sox needed to keep pace in a playoff race. It wasn't a playoff game. And what took Pedro from managing a good game to once again managing a bad game was tabbing John Brebbia to pitch the 9th. Brebbia came into the game having given up runs in his past 2 outings, including he gave up 3 runs and 5 hits in 2/3 of an innings on Sunday to the Royals. Not exactly the guy you want out there in a huge inning. But then again, the Sox bullpen is terrible besides Michael Kopech. And he blew the save, and I'll discuss that in a moment. But according to Cespedes Family Barbecue, this is on X, formerly Twitter, at Cespedes BBQ. This is what their tweet was. The White Sox have 25 blown saves and 27 wins. Okay, think about that stat. 3 things to go over with that stat. First, I would love to see a dramatic shakeup of the bullpen at some point. I know that they've released Tim Hill. I know that they've demoted Leisure, who's now on the IL with a shoulder impingement. I know that they've demoted Steven Wilson. I know that they've, kind of brought some guys up, but I would like to see a huge dramatic shakeup now. The Sox keep touting all these great young arms they have in the minors. So let's see if some of them can get some outs out of the bullpen. It's a great way to give some guys a taste of the big leagues in a lost season. And also, a lot of these arms that they keep touting, not all these guys are going to be able to start because there's only 5 spots in the rotation. So why not see if you can piece together a young, cheap bullpen to move forward with? Because again, one of the things that sunk last decade's rebuild was the really bad allocation of financial limited resources into the bullpen. Second, looking at that stat, you have to wonder, is this a team that is bad and just could use a few pieces, and that basically, is this a team that isn't that bad and just needs a few and that are just a few pieces away from being competitive? Third, When you blow that many chances to win, it shows, as 670 The Score radio host Dan Bernstein pointed out last week. And I know you're like, oh, he's citing Dan Bernstein, but it's a very valid point. The Sox are bad, poorly managed, and unlucky. And all three of those were on display in the ninth. The bad was the bullpen, as it seems like Kopech can be the only one that's trusted. And that was only because he hired Scott Boras. And I have a feeling Scott Boras told Kopech, you won't have a career anymore if you just keep trying to throw the ball harder. Throw your secondary stuff. But there's Brebbia. Gave up a one-out double to Wyatt Langford. He did get the next out, but here came the poorly managed, or the poorly led, or the poorly disciplined, however you want to call it. Langford was able to steal third because no one was paying attention to him. He just went and there he is. He's at third base. So now the tying run is 90 feet away. And even though the sacrifice fly is out of the question, the ability to score a run on a bloop hit is right there. And guess what? It happened as Brebbia allowed a walk to Nathaniel Lowe, even though he got him to 2 strikes. And then John Heim comes up, again, 2 strikes, hits a seeing eye single up the middle. There's your bad luck. Just bloop, right up the middle. And then more bad from the Sox. They can't move the Manfred runner even over to third base in the extra innings. And then there's Langford. He hits the walk-off single in the next inning off of Steven Wilson. So regarding being the team maybe not being that bad, I'm going to say no, they're bad. They're not a revamped bullpen and a few bats away from being good again. This team cannot score runs to put teams away. And I get it. There's going to be tight games. It's the nature of baseball. But they were 1 for 14 with runners in scoring position last night. And those 3 runs matched the total output the Sox had all weekend against the Royals. And Paul DeJong, he broke the 2-2 tie in the ninth with a homer. That was his first home run since July 4th. You're talking about the guy that's leading the team in home runs. They don't hit home runs a lot. And I don't see a foundational hitter that the Sox have right now. You could say Luis Robert Jr., especially if they don't trade him. And he is a tremendously talented player. But he has had 1 season of that fulfilled potential. Otherwise, he's either been hurt or inconsistent. I mean, think about it. He's hitting 188 over his last 7 games and 226 against righties for the season. Now, Pedro, or whoever in the front office, did shake things up with the lineup, had Robert hitting leadoff, and he went 2 for 5. But he also was out at home when he hesitated on a wild pitch. That got him a late start from third to home, and he was out by a country mile. And again, bad base running. This team doesn't do the little things right. So that's not just a few bats away and a bullpen revamp. That is you need to change the entire culture of your organization. And again, that was a bad base running, took a run off the board, and those matter when you lose 4-3. And I'm not saying Luis Robert Jr. is awful. Love him. One of my favorite players. He's a draw. And I think he's a guy you can move forward with. But I don't know if he is the bat you can say that is the anchor of the next great team. I'm not sure if he can be that guy like Tim Anderson or Bobby Witt Jr., who we saw over the weekend. You know, when they're going good, it's going to raise everybody's play toward winning. He might be, say, Robin Ventura or Jermaine Dye. And that means the Sox still have to find their Frank Thomas or Paul Konerko impact type bat. Although I just prefer this time it be a shortstop because that person can also then impact the game on defense. But they are not a bullpen and a bat away. They are a culture change and a complete talent infusion away from being competitive. Well, the Sox are now 3-13 in July and in the middle of an 8-game losing streak. They're trending toward being one of the worst teams in baseball history since they just crossed the 75 losses on the season mark. Let's discuss where they match up with their historically bad peers next on Locked On White Sox. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. And yes, we're talking about your rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival city. Now, the Sox and the San Francisco Giants are not exactly rivals, but they will be foes next month when Chicago travels there in mid-August. So why not take a trip out to San Francisco, check out Fisherman's Wharf, Alcatraz, the Golden Gate Bridge, get some great food at Chinatown, and then take in a game in that amazing ballpark they have. Always wanted to see historic Fenway Park? Sox will be in Boston in September, so use Booking.com to find a place to lay your head if you want to make those trips. From hotels that overlook stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com, on the site, or in the Booking.com app. And I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want, and all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Think Paul DeJong can hit another home run tonight? It's going off at plus 560, meaning say you throw $10 down, you can win $56. Not saying that is the play, just saying you can make some fun prop bets. And say you want to build some interesting parlays. You could, maybe you think Eloy Jimenez, this is the game. He finally puts the ball in the air and hits one out along with DeJong going yard. That is a plus 4,020 and $10. Hey, that could yield you $402.07 in winnings. Hey, the White Sox are bad this year, so why not use FanDuel to make watching the game at least more interesting? Build some fun parlays. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn on the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest sports stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the White Sox take on the Texas Rangers in Game 2 of a 4-game set tonight. First pitch is at 7:05 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with the SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter, and thank you for making the show your first listen. Lots of great White Sox podcasts out there. I just always ask that you make me your first listen, part of your rotation. Again, Sox Machine is a great podcast. The Au White Sox Talk from NBC Sports Chicago, Sox in the Basement. They're all great, and I'm willing to play in the sandbox and shout them out. I just ask that I'm your first listen. That's all. That's all I'm asking. Well, I might have talked about the historically bad pace the Sox are on with SouthsideSox.com Brett Ballantini last week, but the Sox have crossed the 75 loss mark, and honestly, the Sox are trending towards losing 80 games first before they win 30. And I actually asked you that on social media, on X, formerly Twitter, on Locked On Sox. I had a poll up. 100% of you on the respondents said 80 losses happens before 30 wins. I also put the same poll on YouTube on the community page. 86% says 80 losses is going to happen before 30 wins. Oh boy. Not a lot of hope here, obviously. And the reason I'm doing another edition this week of, where the Sox trending in terms of the historically bad is they just passed the diamond mark of 75 losses and being terrible. So let's see where the Sox are in terms of their peers of being bad, franchise-wise and league-wise. All right, so Brett Ballantini, at Brett Ballantini, he's got this up now as he keeps tracking it. 2024, hashtag White Sox, 27-75. Worst 102 game start in Sox history by 7.5 games. Gotta go back to 1948. They're tied for 10th worst MLB start ever. None worst post 1962 start. Worst 192 run differential is 36th worst ever. Season worst 48 games under, 35.5 games out of first place, and it's July 22nd. That's what he tweeted out last night after the Sox lost. So the 1970 White Sox is the worst 162 game season in franchise history. They reached 75 losses on August 11th. Okay, the Sox are nearly 3 weeks ahead of that pace. Although the season started in 1970 on April 7th. So we kind of have to take that into account when we look at the calendar. But heck, last year's team that lost 101 games, they didn't reach the 75 loss mark until August 19th. The 2003 Detroit Tigers, who had the worst record for a full 162 game season. We're talking also 162 games played. And I want to be clear about that because I've always seen the community mark. Well, the Cleveland Spiders, they only won 35 games. Okay, they didn't play 162 games. I'm talking about 162 games. Okay, they hit the 75 loss mark on July 27th. The 62 Mets, the team with the least amount of wins in the 162 game season era. However, that year they only played 161 games and they had a tie for some reason. They hit 75 losses on July 29th. Now, they started the season on April 11th, and the 2003 Tigers started on March 31st, while this year's season started on March 28th. So they're relatively proportional in terms of like when did the season start and when did they hit that 75 loss mark. The 1988 Baltimore Orioles, who got off to the worst start in MLB history for 162 games. I like to mention, track them along with this team because how the Sox got off to a 3-22 start. They reached 75 losses on August 10th. They lost 22 games, I believe, to start the season, but then didn't hit 75 losses until August 10th. So basically an entire month they had of losing, and then they sort of won some games. The 2018 Orioles, who finished with 47 wins, where the Sox are kind of trending towards. They started the season on March 29th. They had 75 losses on July 31st. The 2023 Oakland A's, who were like the White Sox last season in terms of just being absolutely awful, they were on the potential, way to hit towards meeting the Mets and the 2003 Tigers. They had 75 losses on July 25th, but the season started on March 30th. So again, relatively proportional. The Sox, think about it. The Sox have to win 14 games to make sure they avoid to make sure that they actually beat the Mets 40 win mark in 1962. And they got to win 17 games to get ahead of the 2003 Tigers 43 win mark. And right now with an offense that just struggles to score runs and run the bases well, a bad defensive team, and a bad bullpen, along with a team that's ready to trade veteran assets and their ace pitcher in Garrett Crochet, those 17 wins are looking really, really hard to get. And those 14 wins even look like a chore. I mean, again, nobody right now can say that they have seen worse. There's nobody in the generation of Sox fans that can say, oh, this is worse, because the Sox are actually worse than the 1970 team. So anybody that was alive in 1970 can't say, well, it was worse in 1970 like they could last year. That's how bad things are for the White Sox. And just imagine if they had only blown 15 saves. Let's just say they only blow 10 saves. Okay? So you have 27 wins, 10 blown saves. That's 25 and 10. If I'm doing you're adding 15 wins. You're still bad, but you're not historically bad. And I know now people again are changing their tune to say, hey, let's just be the worst team ever. There is no silver lining to that. That's the only reason why I will always die on that hill. With the new lottery rules, as I keep saying, I'll keep repeating, and I'll keep dying on the hill, the Sox will not be picking in the top 9 next year. Heck, the Cubs have a better chance of picking in the top 9 than the White Sox. The highest the White Sox can pick is 10th. And as I've discussed on previous shows and had guests on, the talent pool, yeah, I mean, can you get an impact player? Sure. But the Tigers got Justin Verlander for being historically awful. Kind of hard to get a Justin Verlander at number 10. your chances are greater at, say, number 2 where the Tigers picked, because that was, the old rules where the number 1 pick alternated between National and American League worse. There's just no silver lining, folks. But let's get into some hope as the Sox signed but all but one of their draft picks, and they spent some money. So let's discuss why that is a good thing and why the franchise needs to spend more if they want to get back to being a winning franchise. Next on Locked On White Sox. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And if picking more or less is your selection skill, then you should try out Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's number one daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch those winnings roll in. Get on the excitement and win up to 100 times your cash with the summer games on Prize Picks. And with Prize Picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 while watching Team USA rack up the gold medals this summer. You can make a Prize Picks lineup of players across basketball, soccer, tennis, and golf, and more. In as little as 60 seconds, just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. In tonight's game, you can go with more or less of the 0.5 on Garrett Crochet and John Gray, allowing a first inning run. Think Corey Lee can get on base if he's in the lineup. The more or less of total bases on him is 0.5. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for our first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And the White Sox take on the Texas Rangers in Game 2 of a 4-game set tonight. The first pitch is at 7:05 p.m. Central. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Thank you for sticking with me this long. Shout out to all you everydayers. And, whenever I do those ad reads, why do I feel like when I end, I sound like Sam the Eagle from the Muppets? It's that easy. I just feel like, I have that in the back of my head. Like I should just sound like him. And that is the most underrated Muppet character, in my opinion, Sam the Eagle. He's one of my underrated. He's not my guy. I'm more of a Fozzie Bear, Ralph the dog, but Sam the Eagle, very underrated. So yesterday I discussed that the Sox had signed all but their 4 top remaining picks. Well, the Sox have them signed, and they spent some money on their draft picks. James Fox from Future Sox had this on X, formerly Twitter, at JamesFox917. The hashtag White Sox have consistently spent to the 5% overage in the bonus pool area. Good on them for doing so once again. And that was from a quote tweet, and this is what he put on that quote tweet. The hashtag White Sox came into the 2024 draft with a bonus pool of over 14.5 million. They spent 15.2 million, which includes an overage of $682,200. They'll pay a tax of $511,500 and $500,000 on the overage. Their day 3 signings totaled 1.025 million. In all, they spent 6.8 million on their draft class. And as James said, good for them. And since the Sox don't draw well and they're historically awful, and they have an owner that, he's only going to spend so much, they do have to operate like a small market club. So spending their money on the future, where it's relatively affordable to their revenue streams, is something they should be doing. It's what the good small market clubs do. And I know they're in Chicago, and it'd be great if they're drawing 3 million fans, and that they could act like the Dodgers and the Mets and the Yankees and the Cubs. Well, the Cubs don't spend any money. They just announced that they're putting up the white flag, basically. But, the Angels, it would be great. But since they're not drawing, and they've got an owner that's conservative in how he spends his money, they have to basically act like a small market team. And plus, it's always good to spend on players that are younger and cheaper than older, more expensive, and potentially broken down. See Yasmani Grandal and Dallas Keuchel as my evidence. But I'm going to say this, the Sox should be investing way more and way smarter in that area. And my only concern is the team might be overreacting to NIL, and therefore they're going big money on day one to make sure they get those talented guys, but then they're sacrificing maybe some quality on day 2 and day 3. But again, I might be overreacting because, again, those day 2, day 3 picks, those are usually just guys. Those are guys that you hope to develop to be, diamonds in the rough that you could trade, or that might just be your utility guys. Maybe you hope that Brooks Baldwin, for example, who was the 12th round pick in 2022. Yeah, maybe you do hope you get lucky and he turns out to be an everyday player, a solid everyday player. But usually those day 2, day 3 picks, you're just rolling the dice or you're trying to build up your bullpen, that type of stuff. But I was talking with a friend of the show last night, and I'll have that friend of the show on in August. But it's got some knowledge of how things work on 35th and Shields. And the belief is the Sox are they're putting money in there, but they're not spending it great or in the best way on the development and scouting area. And if I'm interpreting what I heard correct, they have made investments in technology like a pitch lab and that, but it might not be spent or used wisely. And that is the thing that hopefully Chris Getz can clean up. I hope he can get through to Jerry Reinsdorf to make the investments in analytics to help develop the minors and help them select players. That is a good use of expanding your data team. The Sox seem to be proud that they have a smaller analytics team. And okay, in the major league lineup, analytics are very good. You want those scouting reports, that type of stuff. But where you really want to have those analytics is in how you're going to find and draft and develop players. And I know Jerry, he said it last year in his press conference. He would love to, add those scouts that teams have fired because of the data expansion. I say do both. Get more eyes on the high school players with all these showcases that you can use. And then you can use the data for the college evaluation. And then still get some eyes on those college players. Be informed. But I want the Sox to be forward thinking instead of acting like it's 1958 and what would Branch Rickey do? Now, they've started that with getting a pitching guru in Brian Bannister. And I know the bullpen is a mess, as I discussed in the first segment, but the starting pitching has been outstanding and has been done, think about this, with a converted reliever turning into an ace, a rookie who lacks velocity but has a deadly changeup and great command of his pitches, another rookie who is projecting to at least be a solid number 4 pitcher, and a free agent signing who had to go to Korea to reclaim his career. And I can't tell you where Brian Bannister ends and Ethan Katz starts, but Brian Bannister is the senior advisor to pitching. He's basically the director of pitching. And I believe he's put a plan in place to develop those young arms. That's why I'm not too upset that they drafted Hagen Smith with the number 5 overall pick, and he was signed for $8 million, which was a bit of an overslot. But again, scouting director Mike Shirley, he lamented on NIL and how that's going to make it harder to fit players into the bonus pool. And you can tell with the overslots that maybe the team made sure to buy out any potential NIL issues with Caleb Bomar. He was there, the shortstop that they picked in the second round. He got $3 million, so they made sure, hey, we got to overslot him to keep him from going to college. Blake Larson, the other second-round pitcher, said basically, I'm coming, but I want $1.4 million. And he had the leverage because he was a high school guy. So I could see the Sox maybe with that NIL saying, let's go more and more college. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you want to still go high school to maybe either steal draft picks, as they say, steal that first rounder. And the Sox only made that a real true attempt with the final pick. And there's no money left over, so they can't go after that guy. So what I would like the Sox to do is figure out this NIL issue, their fear, and then get Jerry on board with, understanding that there's a great return on investment. You may have not gotten a great return on putting $50 million into Dallas Keuchel, but let's say you put $50 million into your scouting, your analytics, and then your bonus pool money of a couple draft class, that could yield more players on relatively affordable contracts based on your revenue streams. And also, that might be the way that this team can get right and stay right while Jerry Reinsdorf is still the owner. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. But before I go, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest sports stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'll be back tomorrow, and it's Wednesday, so that means Way Back Wednesday. So we'll go over the better days of the franchise tomorrow. Feel free to leave comments about today's topics regarding the Sox blowing another potential win, the historically awful pace the team is on after losing 75 games, and the investment in the draft and development the Sox need to make. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I'll talk to you tomorrow.